I Before I get into my post, I wanted to start off by talking about this book that was really good. It's called "It's Hard to Be a Verb." It's by Julia Cook, and the illustrator is Carrie Hartman, and the book is amazing. It's basically speaking. It's a book that's for, it says, from grades four to second, so fourth grade to second grade. However, in my fifth grade classroom for my students, I feel like it hits a nail on the head. Throughout this book, it goes through, it's 32 pages, and so it seems like it could be longer, but the illustrations on this book, it's huge, big pictures. There's probably only 10 words per page. It's a really quick read. And the thing about this book, too, that's awesome, especially for fifth grade, is a lot of my students aren't able to articulate how they're feeling. And throughout this book, they're basically talking about this child that is going through these things, and they talk about these wiggles, how they come, and how they are, how does he's trying to figure out about himself and why he does these things. And I thought the coolest part was it really shows that a lot of these like my students are not really in control over their actions. Yeah, therefore the title of "It's Hard to Be a Verb." It was super cool going through it, and it gives like language to my students that is simplified. However, it can also sort of justify how they're feeling. And then the book progresses and it talks about how other people see them and how it goes through and what they can do. And it finally concludes by having someone actually help the student. And throughout helping the student, in the book, my students can draw correlations to it in order to help themselves. A lot of my students are having trouble with wiggling and all these different activities. And so they say how hard it is to focus, and they give actual strategies that work in the classroom. So this book, in my opinion, is excellent. I don't know if I would go higher than fifth grade, maybe sixth grade, depending on your students' maturity level, or if they like understand like their self-awareness. But for my kids, this book is perfect, and I recommend anything below fifth grade that you should be using this book. This book is great. So yeah, and now I can get into my discussion post, where we're talking about, I can get in vocabulary and how the vocabulary that we use with the students and the effect on that. In the chapter 7 of the literacy in the 21st century, they went through the typical things of like the word wall. They brought down some like tea party activities where you sit around and you use this language that isn't too natural for you. And then it basically, the what I took away from it was like word consciousness and like using grade appropriate vocab. Now, my students don't always understand the words that I am saying. However, I should continue to use the sophisticated vocabulary because they have to be exposed to it. And then after I say things, I can rephrase it, or I can use that as a tool to have other kids help me rephrase it. Therefore, they're learning from each other. So, like, one of the big things that I noticed, and it's cool because in this chapter it talked about, was homophones and how their words are spelled differently, but they sound the same. And my kids, they just like, they get caught on it. And looking at all the homophones that are in the English language is amazing. And we're just supposed to know that air, as in the air we breathe, and like heir to the throne, are spelled completely differently. And it was just using that to sort of games in order to help my students with that, and it drew my consciousness to that, how difficult the English language could possibly be. And so, for if nothing else, it was just showing me that there are so many different levels to vocabulary and to the English language, which then brings me to the expert post. And the one thing, or a couple of things I took away from it, he was speaking about the vocabulary and things along those lines, but the immersion in literacy, you should be using vocabulary throughout the school day, and you shouldn't be using simplified vocabulary all of the time. You should use those words that the students are going to need to know in order. If you'd never expose them to it, how are they supposed to learn it? And then, like, the immersion is good, but also the demonstration, and then you having the students use these words in their, like, rephrasing it. Those were a couple of the things from, like, the expert post that really stuck out to me. In my class, I know I have a few students that are very, very talented with the English language. They use very sophisticated language, and sometimes I stop and say, like, it surprises me, and that should be encouraged throughout. That should be something that is going through, due to the fact that the immersion of the English language will help throughout everything. And if they are hearing these words, they can then draw connections, and you could see how it makes things easier. And as a teacher, that is what we should be doing. And so these lessons, found a lot of interesting information. But yeah, so and key takeaways from this chapter 7 was the difficulty of the English language, and how I should not be simplifying my language. And then from the expert post was that immersion is very important, and so is the demonstration of how to use this language. And then finally, and last, like, do not forget, if you are in a classroom dealing with children that have a lot of energy, this It's Hard to Be a Verb is a book that I recommend for you. It works best 6th grade and below, but even if you're ahead of those grades, it could still be used. So yeah. All right. Thank you. Have a good one.